We continue now at the top of Daf 65a Daf and Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 65a. The Mishnah says, Baal Ov. What is a Baal Ov? Ze pitom hamidaber mishichiyov. This is a pitom who speaks from his armpit. We'll see Rashi in a moment. V'yidoni, and what's yidoni? Ze hamidaber befiv. This is a person who speaks with his mouth. Hare elu beskila. Both of these sorcerers, their punishment is skila, stoning. V'hanishal bahem and biazhar. And anybody who asks of them is ba'azhara. That's a losase, a warning, a negative commandment. And Rashi explains, Pitom Shem HaMechashef, this is the name of this sorcerer, Hamidaber Mishichyo, who's able to speak from his armpit, Male Es HaMeis Min Haaretz, he brings the dead up from the ground, Umoshev Lo Beshichyo Tachas Ro, so if he places the dead in his armpit underneath his arms, Umedaber Mishachin is able to speak, he makes it speak from his armpit. And Yidoni Hamidaber Befiv, Yidoni is the one who speaks with his mouth, Kedem Mefarsh Begemara. Like the Gemara will explain, Chaya Achas Yesh, there's a certain wild animal, Sheshma Yidua, and the name of that animal is Yidua, that's Yidoni. Umachnes Mimeno Etzem Lesoch Piv, and so he takes a bone from it and he puts it into his mouth. And then through witchcraft, that bone speaks on its own. So both the Ov and the Yidoni, the Baal Ov and Yidoni, they get skila k'dichsev bo'even yirgemu osam, like it says in the pasuk, they get stoned. V'hanishal b'hem, one who asks of them, shabav v'shoel b'hem lahagid lo davar ha'asid. If somebody goes and asks them something about the future, could go and shoal, for example, like Shoal did. B'azhara, that there's a warning against that. The al tifnu el ha'ovos, the pasuk says, don't turn to the ovos. B'azhara d'mechashrim gufayim milo yimatzei b'cha. Now the warning for the mechashrim, for the sorcerers themselves, that comes from lo yimatzei b'cha. There shouldn't be among you v'chover chaver v'shoel over yidoni. There shouldn't be a chover chaver, which the Gemara will also discuss, and there shouldn't be shoel over yidoni. That's the warning for the sorcerers and the witches themselves. And the Gemara says, what's the difference over here, where the Mishnah lists both Baal Ov and Yidoni? And what's the difference in Meseches Krisus to Katani Baal Ov, where it does bring the Baal Ov, Yidoni, but it leaves off Yidoni? Rashi explains, Bekrisus, Kachashav L'chol Krisus Shebetorah. In Krisus, they list all of the cases of Karis in the Torah, Shechayovin Alein Al Shegagos and Chatos, where if you do them by mistake, the person has to bring a carbon Chatos Utanan, and it says in the Mishnah over there, Baal Ov. It has a Mishnah in the Mishnah over there, it lists the Baal Ov, Velotani Yidoni, but it doesn't have Yidoni in that Mishnah. Why is it that it leaves Yidoni out of the Mishnah Meseches Krisus? And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan says, Ho'elu shnehen belav echad nemru. Since they're both the same lav, the same losase, so we leave off Yidoni over there in Krisus. Rashi says, Ho'elu shnehen belav echad nemru, belav di al tifnu ela ovos ve'el hayidonim. It's the lav, it says, don't turn to the ovos and the yidonim. It's all in one lav. And the point is, v'im asa shneim behelam echad, let's say you do both of them together with one mistake, eno chayv el chatas achas. You're only going to be chayv to bring one carbon chatas, shahalavin mechal because it's the losases that divide up chatos. Here it's one losase, so if you do them both, it's going to be one chatos, and that's why only one of them is mentioned in that Mishnah in Meseches Krisus. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Reish Lakish says Yidoni lefi she'ein bo ma'isa. The reason why Yidoni is left off is because it doesn't involve a ma'isa. It does not involve an action. Rashi explains, Reish Lakish Amar Yidoni lahachi lo tanina lo. The reason why that's not taught lahasam mishum da'afilu ki avid lo be'apei nafshe. The reason why it's not taught over there in Meseches Krisus is because even if somebody does Yidoni on its own, lav bar carbon, according to Reish Lakish, there's no carbon. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's just if you do both of them together, so you bring one carbon, but each one you're going to bring a carbon. According to Reish Lakish, Yidoni is not liable to a carbon at all, and the reason is lefi she'ein bo ma'isa, because Yidoni does not involve an action. V'chatas ein bo el ala ma'isa. When it comes to chatas, that's only going to be brought for an action. D'chsev v'yasa achas. It says v'yasa, it has to be an action. Avol bal ov, but when it comes to ov, which is with the armpits, tzarech lahakish bizro osav, person has to knock his arms together, kidel kamon, as the Gemara will explain, v'hakashas rosav chashav le'maisa, that knocking of the arms, that's considered to be an action. Avol hachnosas ha'etzem yidoni eino medaber b'shas maisa el la'achar ha'maisa, but when you put the bone in by yidoni, it's not happening at that time. The speaking is not happening at the time of the action, it happens after. Shu befiv, meaning after it's already in his mouth, medaber ha'etzem me'elav, so then the bone speaks on its own, and that's why that's not considered to be a maisa, and that's why there's no chatos according to Reish Lakish by Yidoni. And the Gemara continues, V'Rabbi Yochanan ma'ishna bal ov denaka. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, really ov and Yidoni are equal. They're the same. We just list one of them. So why is it that the one that we're listing in Meseches Krisus is ov and we're not listing Yidoni? And the Gemara says, Mishum de Pasach Beikra, because that's the first one mentioned in the Pasuk, so that's the one we mentioned in Meseches Krisis. And the Gemara continues, Reish Lakish, my time, Elo Amar Rabbi Yochanan, why doesn't Reish Lakish say like Rabbi Yochanan? Again, the idea that they're both the same lo saseh. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Papa says, Chaluk hein b'misa, because the pasuk, even though it doesn't divide up in terms of the lo saseh, in terms of the negative commandment, but there actually is a division when it comes to the death penalty, and therefore, according to Reish Lakish, there actually is a division of ov and yidoni in the pasuk, and therefore Reish Lakish again gives his explanation that yidoni does not involve a maisa. For Rabbi Yochanan would respond to that, Chaluka delav shma chaluka, a division in the lo saseh, that's called a division, that's what we care about. But the misa lo shma chaluka. But if you have a division in terms of the death penalty, that's not called a chaluka. We don't care about that division in terms of deciding if there's a chiluk among the two prohibitions. And Rashi explains Chaluk and Hein b'misa. Again, Reish Lakish says that they are divided when it comes to the death penalty. Kishapirish skilasan, meaning when the skila is explained, the punishment of stoning is explained by ov and yidoni chilkon hakasav. The pasuk does divide them as independent. It says ki bohen ov o yidoni. It says if there's ov or yidoni, that's the division. Mosu masu be'evan yirgamu osam demeyambam. It says they will surely die, and the punishment is stoning. V'lochsev v'yidoni. It doesn't say and yidoni, which would not be a division. It says o yidoni or yidoni, which is considered a division. And so hilkach, therefore, ihavi yidoni bar karban have. Reish Lakish says if it were true that yidoni on its own would bring a carbon, mechayev alanami kiyav lebahadiyov, so there would be a chiyav as well when it was done together with ov. There would be considered a division. And again, Rabbi Yochanan's response is we go by the division by the lo saseh and not by the death penalty. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yochanan, my time alomer Reish Lakish. Why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say like Reish Lakish, meaning to say, why doesn't he agree with Reish Lakish that Yidoni is not a Maisa, and that's why it's not included in the Mishnah Meseches Krisis? And the Gemara says to that, Omar Loch, Rabbi Yochanan will respond to you, Masnisan de Krisis Rabbi Akiva. The Mishnah in Krisis actually follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. To Omar Lo Boinan Maisa. Rabbi Akiva says you don't need to have an action, and the reason we know that the Mishnah follows Rabbi Akiva is because Megadef is listed over there in Krisis. Megadef cursing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, if you're cursing the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's not a Maisa, so clearly the Mishnah in Krisis is Rabbi Akiva, and so again, Rabbi Akiva would say as well that Yidoni would be considered enough of a Maisa. For Reish Lakish, now Reish Lakish would respond to that, Nehidalo boy Rabbi Akiva Maisa Rabba. Granted that Rabbi Akiva doesn't require a significant action, but Maisa Zuta boy, but he does require a small action, and so therefore, even according to Rabbi Akiva, Yidoni would not be enough of a Maisa. The Gemara says, Megadef my Maisik. If that's the case, so Megadef, what small action is there? And the Gemara says, Akima Svasav, when the person moves his lips, have a Maisa. That's considered at least somewhat of an action, and therefore, again, Megadef is in that Mishnah, even according to the Shita of Rabbi Akiva. But Reish Lakish would say that when it comes to Yidoni, that is not listed in the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Ba'alov my Maisa Ika, what's the action when it comes to Ov? And the Gemara says, Hakashas Ro'osav have a Maisa, the banging of the arms, that's considered to be an action. But the Gemara says, Va'afilu l'Rabbanan, but is that true even according to the Rabbanan? Because again, according to Reish Lakish, this Mishnah in Meseches Krisis again is following Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Akiva, according to Reish Lakish, does require at least some Maisa, and that's why Megadef is considered to be somewhat of a Maisa, and that's why it is mentioned in the Mishnah. But according to Reish Lakish, that's true by Megadef. There's a Machlokas, Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan by Megadef, but when it comes to Ov, there's no Machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Akiva. It seems that everybody agrees that that's considered to be a Maisa, and so the Gemara now is asking, is that true according to the Rabbanan, that that's considered to be a significant action? V'atanya, but we learned in a Braisa, Eino chayev el al davar sheyesh bo Maisa. When it comes to worshiping Avodah Zarah, the person is only chayev if it's something that involves an action. Kagon zibuach, kitor, v'nisach, v'shtachava, for example, sacrificing, burning, libations, and bowing. V'yamar Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish said, Man tana hishtachava, who is the author of this Braisa that says bowing? Rabbi Akiva hidamar lo b'inan Maisa. That's Rabbi Akiva, who says that an action is not needed. And so you see that according to Reish Lakish, when it comes to bowing, that's only considered to be a Maisa according to Rabbi Akiva, and so therefore it would seem the Rabbanan would not agree that hishtachava, within Reish Lakish's opinion at least, the Rabbanan would not agree that hishtachava is a Maisa, and if hishtachava, if bowing is not a Maisa, so Ov also should not be a Maisa. That's the question of the Gemara. And the Gemara continues, continues, Rabbi Yochanan Amar. Now Rabbi Yochanan disagrees in terms of the interpretation of this brisa. Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu Tamer Rabbanan, you could even say that the Rabbanan agree that Hishtachava is considered to be a Maisa, because Kfifas, Komasa L'Rabbanan, because when it comes to bowing, when the person bows down, according to the Rabbanan, have a Maisa, that's considered to be a Maisa. That's Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of Hishtachava. And so the Gemara now concludes its question. Hashta l'Reish Lakish Kfifas Komasa L'Rabbanan lo have a Maisa. If Reish Lakish is saying that bowing according to the Rabbanan is not a Maisa, so Hakashas or Osav the Balov have a Maisa, are we going to say that the banging of the arms by a Balov, that's considered to be a Maisa? And so therefore that's the question of the Gemara over here. How can we say that Ov is considered a Maisa within Reish Lakish, within the Rabbanan? And the Gemara says, the Gemara answers, Ki kama Reish Lakish nami l'Rebbe Akiva. When Reish Lakish was saying that also, that's also only according to Rebbe Akiva. Aval Rabbanan lo, but when it comes to the Rabbanan, they would actually disagree, meaning when it comes to Ov, according to Reish Lakish, Rebbe Akiva would say that Ov is considered an action, but the Rabbanan would disagree. They would argue there as well. But the Gemara says, if so, if that's the case, Yotza Megadef u Balov mibayle, it should say that they're excluding both Megadef and Balov, meaning to say, it shouldn't say that Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan are only arguing about Megadef, it should say that they're arguing about Ov as well. And the Gemara continues, Ela Amar Ula, rather Ula says, what does it mean when it says Ov in that Mishnah in Krisos, where everybody agrees it's an action, b'mekater l'shed, the case is that he's burning to a demon. The Gemara says, Amar le Rava, Rava says back to Ula, mekater l'shed, Ovid avodas kochavim, if he's burning to a demon, isn't that worshipping avodah zarah? We'll see Rashi in a moment. Elamar Rava, rather Rava says, b'mekater l'chaber, what he's doing is he's burning in order to bring together, to bring the demons. Again, we'll see Rashi in a moment. Amar le Abaya, Abaya says back to Rava, hamekater l'chaber, if somebody's burning l'chaber, chover chaveru, that's actually mentioned in the Torah as chover chaver, that's somebody who's a charmer, and that's only a lav, that's only a losase, that should not be mentioned in that Mishnah in Krisos. The Gemara says, no, yes, you're right, that is chover chaver. However, v'atorah amra chover zeh b'skila, but the Torah says this particular chover actually gets punished with skila, and that's what we're talking about in the Mishnah. And Rashi explains, b'mekater l'shed, again, the first answer is it's mekater l'shed. Ba'alov de katani b'krisos, when we mention ov and krisos, the modu be'rabbanan, where the rabbanan admit, they say that there's kares over there, it's considered an action. B'hachi askinam, what we're talking about is as follows, shemekater l'fnei hashed, he burns in front of the demon, hamamuna aloso davar, which is appointed over this issue relevant to ov, to have a maisa gomer, and that's considered a full action. But the Gemara said, ovid avodas kochavimu, the Gemara said, that's considered avodah zara. We already have avodah zarah listed in the Mishnah in Krisos, so that can't be what Ov is referring to. Umeshani, and the Gemara answers, "Mekater l'chaber." What's the case over here is he's burning l'chaber, meaning eino mekater l'shem elos. He's not doing it as a form of worship, al yedei haktara, but through the burning nasa hamechashvos l'chaber hashedim l'kan. It's some kind of sorcery. It brings the shadim to this location. The Gemara says chover chaver. Well, isn't that the same as chover chaver? V'eino ela belav. Isn't that just a lav? It's a losase. The Gemara says, no, it is chover chaver, but v'hatorah amra chaver zeh, kagon zeh b'skila. The Torah says this particular chover chaver is b'skila. Teretzu, this is an answer. Me'achar shemechabers hashedim b'mezid, when the person is trying to gather the demons on purpose, amra hatorah sheyeh b'skila. The Torah says the punishment is skila, v'chol shezadona chayev misa, al shegagaso mevi carbon. If you have a death penalty for doing it on purpose, then if you do it by mistake, it's a carbon. T'chiamrinon chover chaver eino ela be'azhara. When we say chover chaver is just a warning, that's just if a person uses sorcery to gather wild animals or to gather domesticated animals or snakes or scorpions to one place through this kind of sorcery, that's just a lav. But if what the person is doing is he's gathering these demons, so then already we say that the punishment is going to be skila. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, the rabbis taught, chover chaver. What's chover chaver? Echad chaver gadol v'echad chaver katan. It doesn't matter if it's big or small. V'afilu nechashim v'akravim. Even if what we're talking about is just snakes and scorpions. And Rashi explains, Echad chaver gadol means to say ma'asef chayos u'behemas gedolos. Doesn't matter if he's gathering large animals, or chaver katan mechaber shkatzim uramasim. He's just gathering small creeping animals. And Rashi continues, Vafilo nechashim ve'akravim likroson zeh bazeh. Let's say he wants to set them, the snakes and scorpions, against one another. Olamakam midbor, bring them to a wilderness. Shelo yimso b'yishuv ve'yaziku, that they shouldn't be b'yishuv, they shouldn't be in a settled area and cause damage. That also is going to be included in chover. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Hilkach, therefore, Haiman ditzamid zibura ve'akrab, if somebody brings together a hornet and a scorpion, Afagav dekamechavin delolisku, even if he's bringing them together, and his entire intention is that they shouldn't cause damage, asur, it is still going to be forbidden. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, what is the difference that when a person bows, according to the Rabbanan, that's considered an action? But moving the lips, meaning by megadef, that's not considered an action. Why do they make that distinction? And the Gemara says, Rava says, Shani megadef, it's different by megadef, one who curses the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hoel v'yeshno belev, because that takes place in the heart, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf 65a Amid Beis.